Welcome to Oh the Humanities, a podcast produced by the University of New England Center for Global Humanities. Our conversations are devoted to shining a light on the important work being done in the humanities at UNE and other colleges across the U.S. and around the world. My name is Josh Pahigian, and I'm your host. Our guest today is Kristen Case, who joins me in studio at UNE's Portland campus for the Health Sciences. Kristen is a two-time winner of the Maine Literary Award for Poetry. She's also the founding director of the Monson Seminar, which provides arts fellowships for low-income and first-generation college students who immerse themselves in the creative process during residencies in Monson, Maine. Kristen is also the author of several books and the editor of many academic collections. In 2025, she has added 2 new books to her resume, and we'll get around to talking about them soon. But first, let's meet our guest. Kristen, welcome to Oh the Humanities.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here, Josh.
Absolutely. We're so happy to have you back on campus, I'll say. Kristen, I remember we first met in 2014 when you came and delivered a lecture for the UNE Center for Global Humanities. And I had the pleasure that night of introducing you. And then I think we capped it off with some colleagues at a nice dinner downtown. It was a magical night in which you delivered a lecture titled Walden, the Humanities, and the Classroom as Public Space. And I remember in that lecture, you told some stories from the classroom, interactions you had had with students in building a case for the humanities and their enduring importance against charges of irrelevance and elitism that have only persisted and amplified in recent years. In that talk, you argued that you weren't so much worried for the future of the humanities as you were worried about public access to them. And in the intervening years, it seems like students and families, colleges have just become more and more focused on the vocational aspect of a higher education. ROI, what's the return on investment, seems to trump the intrinsic value of learning for learning's sake, to becoming an interesting person, a person that finds the world mesmerizing and empowering, and all those things that those of us who had the good fortune, like I did, of attending a liberal arts college came to understand. So I don't fault schools for this. I don't fault students or parents. I know college is expensive. I get it. But I share that concern that you expressed that night in 2014 when you suggested that the humanities were in danger of becoming a luxury good. And my first question is for you, in the intervening decade plus, how have your thoughts evolved? How has the world evolved? And what's the state of the humanities and public access to them as we sit here in July 2025?
Boy, when you put it like that, it's hard. You know, I am normally I tend toward optimism in my kind of orientation toward the world. That is my temperamental disposition.
I tend to fatalism, so hopefully we can balance each other out.
But yeah, it is hard to look at the trajectory since 2014 and not feel really like things have gotten just much worse in terms of access and a kind of embrace within the public university of one of its great historic functions, which has been to kind of create a broad-minded, deeply engaged citizenry, and that sense of developing a sense of history, developing a sense of shared meaning, developing a sense of an ethical orientation toward the world. All of those things really feel like central features of university life in the tradition of the American university that have really been left behind and left behind quite quickly in sort of an alarmingly rapid way at the campuses of our public universities more and more. And so it's a sad and frightening trend to witness. On the other hand, I will say I left kind of a traditional academic role in 2024. And since that time, I have had so many conversations with dentists and bank tellers and folks who work in offices and folks who work at nonprofits about their intellectual hunger and their desire for creative expression and their desire for a place to talk about big ideas. And so, I think that is a basic human hunger and need, and it's not going anywhere. And so how we want to respond to and think about this facet of our shared life is a real pressing question right now. But at the end of the day, I'm not fatalistic because I do see this as something that human beings genuinely and very deeply crave and kind of have in every civilization that ever has existed. And so it will go somewhere, right? This desire for knowledge, this desire for, again, kind of like creativity and talking about big questions and sort of making and receiving work that is deeply challenging to what it means to be a person. We will continue to do this as a species. And to me, the question is kind of like, does the university want in on that or no? Will it just go elsewhere, go to podcasts, go back to books, go back to maybe monasteries? I don't know. But it's not going to be eradicated. It's just going to find new ways. And so at this particular moment, I'm really interested in what those ways might be.
Well, that does give me some sense of optimism, and I feel like I play my small part in leading the Center for Global Humanities, where we can offer a forum to the community, some young people, but some people your age, my age, some people a little bit older, a place to come together and share ideas. We don't always come up with the answers, but we ask a lot of questions, as the humanities are prone to. And it's enriching. It connects us to something bigger than just us. And I think your project at Monson Arts sounds like another direct response to that hunger in society for a space. And in your case, it's focused mostly on younger people, a space where we can do that sort of deep thinking and create something from it. Could you tell us a little bit more about the project? How you came up with the idea for it, what exactly it entails?
Absolutely. So I love talking about the Monson Seminar. It's really my passion project. And it originated when I was a resident. So it's an arts, Monson Arts is an arts residency. And I was a resident there in creative writing. In the pandemic, at the kind of endish of, we weren't really in lockdown. So I want to say, well, whenever that was, that winter, that was kind of the second winter of COVID.
I think I've blocked it out about 3 years.
No, the years
there, I know when you're
the
talking.
Years are fuzzy. And so I was there for 3 weeks, and I was able to, I got offline and I wrote every day, and I had kind of long stretches of solitude every day, and I looked out at a lake and I ate beautiful food that was prepared for me. And it was an absolutely transformative experience. And so much of that transformation was the permission that an artist residency is such one of the great luxuries of the world. If you can ever have the opportunity to do one, you should. But what a residency allows is you to put everything else down. It's a finite period, and generally speaking, at many residencies, meals are provided and housing is provided. And the idea is just do your work. No more excuses, no more laundry list of to-do things to do, no more like meals to prep every 3 hours. You just, for a short period of time, you focus on your work. And that is so freeing. And I felt myself shift into another gear creatively and intellectually. And it was a gear that I didn't know that this machine that is my brain. I didn't know my brain had that gear. And I was at this point a professor. And so it's not as if had not had the opportunity for intellectual and creative development. I had had plenty of opportunity, but something about this solitude and the structure and the time blocked off allowed me to focus in a way that really transformed my work and my relationship to my work. And the whole time I was there, I was observing this happen in myself, and I was thinking, like, this is the experience I want most for my students. And I was thinking especially of my students who, at that time, I had a student who opted out of an honors thesis because she had to prepare meals for her large family, and they were all living together in a trailer. And I had another student who opted out of a different opportunity because she had to work shifts at the local laundromat. And so I was just seeing, those are just two examples of many, many students I've had over the years who, for financial and financially related reasons, were doing fine getting through college, but never having that intensive, mind-changing, kind of transformative intellectual and creative experience. And so when I saw what it took for me to have that experience, I thought, how can we just like deliver this to these students? Because once you have done your own best work and pushed yourself to that place of producing something you feel really proud of and that you know you worked as hard as you can work to create, I think it just opens life possibilities to know that you're capable of that. So that even if it doesn't happen again for a while, in your mind, you know that you have this capacity. And I just think that opens worlds to students. And so anyway, that's the long version of the inspiration for the seminar. We were incredibly lucky to get the support of the Libra Foundation and Monson Arts to be able to host 12 students a summer, completely free of charge. We had an arrangement first with University of Maine Farmington and now with University of Southern Maine to get accreditation. So the students who come get 3 college credits. They get a free 3 weeks in Monson with a beautiful house, just like the artist residence, and a beautiful studio space. And they come and they pursue interdisciplinary projects. They work with an advisor, and we do a lot of community building around the group. And these are all Pell eligible and first generation college students is our target demographic. So this is really an experience for those students for whom that kind of really impactful experience is often out of reach.
Amazing. I'd love to hear about a specific project or two that you can reference. But before we get to that, I just want to read one of the student testimonials from your website because reading these is just so moving. There are several, and I just picked one. And one student wrote about the experience. I don't know if I can ever adequately put into words how much these 3 weeks mean to me and how much I am so grateful to have not only the space to pursue my dreams, but also the opportunity for the amazing support from the faculty and my classmates. Truly, from the bottom of my soul, I thank you for providing me with this space. I can hear my passion calling me again. What a great line. It must make you feel really good to know that something you created is having that sort of impact.
It feels wonderful, although I will say, in some ways, it feels so simple. It's sort of like there's an admissions process for the seminar, and we choose students who have that passion. And then, the gambit or the gamble of it, which to us never really felt like much of a gamble at all, is if you take people who desperately want to make good work and do something creative and interesting that challenges themselves, and then just give them the space and time to do it, they will amaze you and amaze themselves. And that was certainly true. So I will actually talk about that student because hearing her words brings her to mind. This is an extraordinary student who is just a perfect example. A student who was always working during college, always running in a million directions, succeeding, doing well, but never really having time to devote to a project that she had been envisioning, a novel that she had been wanting to write since she'd been sort of developing these characters since she was, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14. And she had this dream of this novel. And of course, she thought when she proposed to come to Monson, she was going to write the whole novel in the 3 weeks. And she did not write the whole novel, but she wrote the opening chapters. And hearing her read from them at our closing event, it just was an absolutely amazing experience, because it was like, oh, this is an adult writer. This is a mature writer who has kind of found this voice and is ready to put this work into the world that she has been carrying in her head for so long. And yeah, it was a real joy. And she was just a delightful and wonderful person as well.
Are most of the projects writing focused, or does some incorporate art or multimedia?
Yeah, they really run the gamut. We've had quite a few music students. We've had compositions and music performance. We've had recording. Lots of writers. I would say writers are probably the biggest component of any group, is writing of one kind or another. But there too, there's really a spectrum from kind of more traditional research-based writing to poetry collections to hybrid style writing and memoir, and then visual arts as well. I'm trying to think who I'm leaving out here. We've had graphic novelists, and we haven't had a lot of. We've had a few sort of film related, sort of like working on a screenplay. We would love to have somebody doing photographs or film that we haven't had much of yet, but the projects really do run the gamut.
Now that you've put your finger on this model that clearly works and has great results, would you ever think about expanding it? Is it scalable? Is it something that you could pitch to people in other states, in other locations where they could have this sort of program? And have you had any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so we think about this all the time. And in answer to the first thing I'll say is that we are hoping to expand, although at this moment, what we are hoping to do is offer more frequent seminars rather than either lengthen or increase the number of students. And part of that has to do with the limitations of the facility that we use at Monson Arts. So really, they can host 12 at a time. And we love that size. I do think that further down the road, we may start looking at longer offerings. I would love to see our kind of core seminar class accompanied by other classes, like, possibly even elective courses. So there's many ways that I think that it could expand, but I would say that and could be offered at, say, other residencies or other universities. I think the core elements are protecting student time and providing resources that really look in a realistic way at the demands on students' time, and thinking ahead about what is going to allow a student who has, researchers now talk about this phenomenon called time poverty, which, we were just talking about parenting teenagers. Like, we know all about this, but no one has a greater share of time poverty than low-income college students. I mean, they are just pulled in so many directions and trying to keep so many balls in the air. So I think a really grounded, realistic approach to what are the real life obstacles to students doing what, there's a book out a few years ago that was quite impactful for me, by a guy named Cal Newport called Deep Work that talked about the difference between sort of surface work and deep intellectual work that takes time, and how we kind of as a culture, we are losing our capacity for deep work in our continual multitasking and internet-paced work lives. And so, what are the requirements of deep work? How are they different from, the sorts of daily tasks that we are constantly running? And how do we make space for that? So I think there's lots of space for programs that emphasize those things and particularly target them at high need students.
So I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I'm wondering if we keep hearing about AI and how it's going to transform our work and our lives and higher education. I wonder if as AI does more of that surface level work, maybe that one positive way it could go would be it would create more space for us to do that deeper level thinking, tap into the creativity that you found during the residency you described. I suppose another way it could go is it just puts all of us out of work, and then we drown our sorrows on the internet and playing video games and connecting with other disaffected people. But as AI transforms our workforce, our economy, our lives, I wonder if at some point we arrive at a place where maybe we've heard people talk about universal basic income because the machines are doing all the work and humans suddenly have this leisure time. And I wonder if that would create an opportunity for the humanities to really rise again. Because if you think back to earlier times, where the wealthy would send their kids to elite schools just so they could be well-rounded, interesting people. You look at fabulously rich people now, like Paul McCartney or Jim Carrey or George W. Bush, and they're painting in their latter years.
Yes.
So the humanities aren't going to go away, as you were saying earlier. But I wonder if humanities, as college changes generations from now, as AI is doing more and more, I wonder if we could get back to college as a place you just go to really connect with your humanity and those aspects of yourself that are moved by the humanities. Is that a utopian vision or a dystopian vision, or hopefully we won't be around to see it? I don't know.
No, I think I love that vision, and I think I have a hard time with kind of like long-term future envisioning, sort of like on that large kind of scale. But I do think that AI pushes us in a potentially interesting way to ask the question, like, well, what do we do this basic activity for? Like, why do we write books? Why do we write essays? Why does anyone write an article? And there are many answers to those questions. And some of those functions can now be fulfilled by AI, but certainly not all of them. Nobody writes a poem simply to have a poem to point to. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, right? Like, surely there are students in classes now writing poems on AI and submitting them. But to my mind, there has been a failure in that scenario long before the student turned in the AI poem, right? That there's a kind of failure to ask a really deep question about what is the meaning and value of this activity. And so I do think that all of the changes that are happening in the university, including AI, that kind of impact of AI, force us to ask questions about what we want our lives to look like, where we locate meaning in our lives, how we connect what we are learning to those centers of meaning. And I think that's what the humanities do. So I think tapping in, and I think students know that and want that. I mean, this is my other instinct. So, right, I have 2 teenagers, and my daughter's an incredible artist and just a wonderful, creative, smart person. But, she grew up as a digital native, and she is on her phone all the time, as am I, by the way. And partly as a result of being on her phone a lot, something she does not do for pleasure is read books. But she wants to. And there is I've had to, as a kind of literature person myself, I've had to really back off of this and just allow it to be her journey. But it is so interesting to hear her to express her own sense of my mind is impoverished by being online all the time. And I want to change that.
YouTube videos aren't going to fill that gap.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we do a disservice to students when we only talk about kind of what's good for them and what they need instead of engaging what they deeply want and need, because I think it's often something good. I think they have their own motivations that can be very powerful. Students are at different developmental stages, but tapping into that really basic human drive to think deeply and to create and to make meaning and to connect with others. I think those things aren't going anywhere. And the more these technological advances and economic issues push those things to the fore, the better.
Well said. Let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about your writing. You're still finding the intellectual space as you're raising two children, just like I am, to find that dedicated time to invest in your writing. And you've produced two wonderful books. I've read one, and I'm looking forward to reading the other in just the last few years. I thought maybe we would start by having you talk a little bit about Henry David Thoreau's Calendar, which will come out in November from Milkweed Editions. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about it, and then we'll get around to Daphne, which is already out because I've actually read that one and have some questions, and I'll have more to contribute to that part. But tell us a little bit about the Calendar. What is it? How did you get the idea for it? And what should we look forward to when we see it in November?
Wonderful. Thank you for your interest and for asking me about these two projects. The Calendar is a project that I've been working on sort of in one way or another since about 2008 or 9. So
Wow.
It's been a long time in the works. And essentially what it is, as many people may know, Henry David Thoreau, the great 19th century transcendentalist thinker and naturalist, author of Walden, kept a very extensive journal, and he's really started keeping his journal in earnest in kind of the way we think about the sort of richest parts of his journal in 1850, and he died in 1862. So we have about 12 years of, and he stopped keeping the journal really in 61. So we have about 11 years of intense, long, beautifully written journal entries that he kept in kind of the second half of his career. And Walden, his time at Walden was in the 1840s. So in some way, in some ways, the Walden experience really precedes the kind of highlights of the journal. Thoreau, at the very end of his life, beginning in 1860, although there were kind of glimmers of this before 1860, begins to organize material from his journal in a kind of elaborate, almost a kind of index that took the form of seasonal charts. So he created charts for 6 of the 12 months, April, May, June, and then October, November, and December. And these charts were called charts of general phenomena. That's what he called them. So it was, say, general phenomena for April is the title of one, general phenomena for May, etc. And they were organized like spreadsheets. So they traced the year. So he begins the project in 60, the spring of 60, and then he picks up the project in the fall of 61, so a little over a year later. And the charts run from usually 1850 or 1851, written across the top are the years, all the way to his present moment, so 1860 or 1861. And then phenomena associated with that season, so weather-related phenomena, things about the height of the river. And then he created a grid, and he used his survey. He was also a surveyor by profession, and he used his surveying paper to make these charts. So they're large. And he created a grid like a spreadsheet and would copy dates and excerpts from the journal when these, for example, one very common one was river highest. So what was the date in April of 1850, 1851, 1852, 1853, that the river was at its height. So for him, there's a lot that's interesting to me about this project. One is he included himself in the charts. So a classic November entry is first fire at evening, right? So the first night that he lights a fire in his house, it's cool enough that you need a fire. Conversely, in April, first day without greatcoat. And then actually this is kind of a funny one for New Englanders because shortly after that is like, wear greatcoat again, right? So April is that time where you like take off the winter coat, but not for good. You know it's not for good.
Summer's here.
Exactly.
Oh, wait. Yes.
Exactly. And tracing those phenomena, again, across the year. So it's really doing two things. It's understanding his own behavior as seasonal. So understanding himself as a human being, exhibiting seasonal signs of seasonal life, just as a tree exhibits signs of seasonal life. And it's also understanding time as inherently cyclical. So he is really thinking about April not as a point on a line, but as an annual phenomenon that recurs. So it's a very interesting project. The moment that he takes up the project in 1860 is a moment when his mind is really on fire with the death of John Brown and his kind of the height of his involvement in abolitionism, and also his reading of On the Origin of Species, which happened on New Year's Day of 1860. So he is just electrified at this season, spring of 1860, about these new intellectual discoveries, and he is seeing connections everywhere. And so the charts, to me, feel like this kind of sudden burst of inspiration that is like, wait, I've been tracking all of this information linearly in the journal, and I can reorganize it and get a new vision of what a season is by doing it in this way. He then as he gets ill, with the kind of what will be the illness that kills him, he puts the project away, goes to Minnesota, makes this kind of last-ditch effort to improve his health, which is unsuccessful. And sort of after he returns from Minnesota in the fall of 61, it's pretty clear that he is dying. And then this amazing thing happens, which is he picks up this project again. And to me, those charts, so this is October, November, and December charts, we know that they happened later because they include the column for 61. I believe that those charts were really taken up in a very different mood, one which was elegiac, and these charts he made from his bed and bedroom that had been moved to the ground floor because he couldn't really walk up the stairs anymore.
What was he dying of? Do you know?
It was, an illness that then activated underlying tuberculosis.
Okay.
So he had contracted tuberculosis decades before and had weakened lungs ever since.
So it was a slow departure for him. He had time to be reflective.
Exactly. And in my interpretation, he was really using his own journal as a way to be in the natural world. He was housebound. He could not really be outside for more than a few minutes at a time. And so his own record that he had created became a kind of world that he was able to enter into again through the composition of these charts. So I find it incredibly moving and incredibly interesting to think about what was motivating him for this kind of unique vision of reorganizing this material at the very end of his life.
Yeah, it sounds really fascinating. And I've already pre-ordered it from one of the big book retailers who shall remain nameless. So I'll look forward to getting it around November.
Bookstore.org, everyone.
Do you have anything special planned for its release, or will you just do a small celebration or some readings?
Yeah, I will be doing some readings around. I'm doing a lecture, I think, at USM. And what else am I doing in Maine? I'm doing an event up in Farmington in November. And I'm doing, I'm very excited to be part of the Concord Festival of Authors, which is an annual festival that they have in Massachusetts in Thoreau's home community at the end of October. So there'll be a lecture, I think, at Tufts. So there will be a few events around.
Wonderful. And we already have our whole fall CGH schedule booked out, but hopefully in a future year, maybe next year, we can get you back in, because I'm sure our environmental studies students would be very interested in this.
I'd be delighted.
Well, that sounds great. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about Daphne, which is titled, of course, in homage to the nymph from Ovid's Metamorphoses, who's pursued by Apollo and ultimately transformed into a laurel tree. I'm just going to read the back jacket description of the book for the framing it provides. Daphne is a meditation on the centrality of predation to the Western lyric tradition. The book is punctuated by lyric essays which circle obsessively around questions of what knowing is, what is possible to know with certainty, and whether it is possible to know another person. The poems and lyric essays in this collection are in dialogue with poems about Ovid's Metamorphoses, Shakespeare's Hamlet, and Wyatt's sonnet, Whoso list to hunt. Taken together, these works interrogate the ways violence both disrupts and enables our ways of knowing one another, placed in counterpoint to a recurring refrain signaling the possibility of a non-predatory desire. I read the book in two sittings, and it was something of a surreal experience, and I mean that in the best possible way. It's poetry, but it's also prose, and it's got so many references. A few I had to look up as I went just to ground myself. There's Ovid, there's Keats, there's Shakespeare. It also gets into some language, the origin and meaning of words like rape, ravish, ravishing, violence, vehemence, and so on. So I found that very interesting. It incorporates art, the famous marble statue of Apollo and Daphne, music, the notes or spaces between the notes in Beethoven. So it blends together so much, as well as some experiences either from your life or your narrator's life in reflection. So I found it really thoroughly engrossing and mesmerizing to read, that it could weave so many different strands into something that was coherent and very engaging. How did it come to be? And what was the, you said the calendar was a work that you began, at least conceptually, in 2008. Was this a shorter duration project, or was this also a project that had been percolating over years?
Also percolating over years, as you would maybe expect from your beautiful description. Thank you. And I would say, it really, a lot of it deals with things I had been wrestling with probably since I was an English major, and really, as a college student, found myself thinking about the role of gender in literature and in kind of my own love of literature, and particularly my very deep. There is every work, with one possible exception, every work referenced in that book is a work I truly love. So this was not a book written to kind of like just call out misogyny in literature. It was a book written to really examine, what do I do about the works that I love so much that they feel like who I am is wrapped up in my love for these works that also have bear some relationship to either kind of like hating women, wanting to kill women, thinking about women as sort of essentially disposable, and that thread woven through the long kind of history of Western literature and culture. And it came to a head for me during the Me Too movement, which is really in the aftermath of that is when I wrote this book. And that was such an amazing moment of reckoning for the culture. But there also was a way in which it felt to me like the discourse around sexual violence became very simplified and very kind of like there was a lot of a sense of like, if we just come up with the right 7 words and then make everybody say those words or sign off on that they've watched the video or, whatever, done the training.
There, it's fixed.
Then we'll have fixed it, right? And I kept thinking like, wait, I think it's deeper than that. I don't think it's so easy. And I think some of these issues go really far back, and I don't know what it would mean to fully extricate them. And I was a little scared to find out. And so this is another residency experience. I actually wrote most of that book at a residency, a different one. I would have the great fortune to be able to go to the McDowell residency. And I don't think I could have written it in my home with my children, with my daily life going on. It just required me to kind of really sit with a lot of darkness and a lot of, things that were hard to look at, both in myself and my own life and also in the works themselves and in our culture. And I just felt compelled to do that. And so the book is a sort of record of my trying to look at that long history in a way that was not reactive or not immediately trying to find a solution, but just to look at it and sort of tell my version of the truth about it. So
it's very reflective and very powerful. I think I'd be remiss before we wrap things up if I didn't ask you if you'd be so kind as to just read a few verses for our listeners so they can hear your voice and just get a little bit of a sense of what the book is like. Kristen, here's my book.
Thanks so much. Yes, I'm happy to do this. Oh, it's so lovely. You're underlining. That's so lovely to see.
It was instilled in me as an 18-year-old.
It thrills me. It thrills me, someone underlining my words. So I'll read one of the tonic poems. So throughout this book, there are several shorter poems labeled that are titled tonic 1, 2, 3, etc. And I really was playing with the idea of tonic in terms of music, like the tonic music or having to do with the word tone, and then the kind of tonic quality of healing, to the suggestion of healing. So something that is tonic is sort of good for you, like medicine. And so as I was writing this book that was quite difficult to write, I was sort of consciously interrupting myself with more lyric moments that I hoped would have a kind of tonic effect on the reader. So this is the one that is most related to the title of the book, and it's called Tonic 3, Daphne. Proximate to the dark, mossy understory and the watery leaf light, you forget the sentences about your body and its capture, the words falling from you one by one, even as you feel them becoming. Green and green and green, and the way the light enters you and your whole being leaning toward the thin and continual and indifferent exchange. A pale moss of repeated small forms overtaking your skin, even this annihilation, now a kind of harmony.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kristen Case, thank you so much for joining me today.
This is an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Josh.
That's it for this episode of Oh the Humanities. As always, thanks for listening, and feel free to tell us what you thought of this conversation on the CGH social media channels: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X.